Ed Hodgdon from Funtown, Splashtown in Maine, and also NEAAPA. Thank you for joining us today on the Attraction Pros COVID-19 video series. How you doing, Ed?
I'm doing great today. It's, taking it day by day, but today's a great day. It's sunny. It's in the 70s. I'm excited.
All right, you've got a great roller coaster behind you.
I do. Yeah, that is Excalibur. That's Funtown's, one of Funtown's pride and joys. It was built in 1998. It's a custom coasters design. And it would have been about 20, this would have been season 23 for it.
Yeah.
So we're very excited. It's a great ride. So I'm going to miss not being able to go on it this year.
Yeah. So let's just talk a little bit about that, and then we'll talk a lot about what's going on in New England overall. But Funtown Splashtown was one of the first parks that I remember hearing about that wasn't going to open for 2020. So can you tell us just a little bit about that? And I know you're really focusing a lot of things on 2021 now. So can you just kind of walk us through what you know about that?
Sure. So, I mean, Maine, if for those of you who have never, visited our beautiful state, we are in the Northeast, one of the most northeastern state in the United States, and we're very tourism dependent. So we rely on day trippers coming to the state. And especially that's a lot of Funtown Splashtown USA's businesses, those day trippers and people from around the state coming, camp groups, school groups, rec camps, the whole bit. As the COVID-19 pandemic has worn on, we were starting to see the writing on the wall that these camps aren't going to be coming. People are going to have to self-quarantine or have some type of quarantine before they can even come in the state. Things were just stacking up against us a lot. And so to, sort of get out in front of things, the decision was made that we were going to, not open for the 2020 season and instead focus all of our resources on making 2021 fantastic. So even though we're not open right now, I will say that, our staff that's here right now is painting up a storm, looking at what, things that maybe we weren't able to, we would look at and be like, oh gosh, if we only had time. And now we have that time. So we're really focusing on the aesthetics of the park. They were, moving shrubs around yesterday. I saw, the landscaping crew was out doing that. They're painting buildings. We're really trying to give the park a fresh look for 2021 and really just putting our resources on that right now.
So that's really interesting, and that was going to be a question I was going to ask us kind of by taking the summer off. What all is the park focusing on doing in addition to the landscaping, the aesthetics, to make sure that opening day 2021, that it's almost like a grand reopening after the amount of time that the park will have been closed.
Yeah, we haven't really gotten into that yet as far as, I think we're still trying to figure out what the new normal is going to be first before we start looking at those things and, and looking at what on the operation side, what changes we will have to make. And that will be our big project during the off season will be, or what would be considered an off season will be that, and looking at what that's going to look like for 2021, different, a lot of it's going to be different. And we're going to, start looking at those things when that, probably in the fall and in the winter.
Sure.
Yeah, Ed, I think one of the things that you probably have a little bit of an advantage of like making this decision is that most of your maintenance and everything happens over the winter. When up in Maine, it gets really cold and it's snowy, right? So now you're going to have a little bit of a breather when it comes to a little nicer weather when you're doing some of those things as well. So that might, be a nice benefit for you too.
Absolutely. In Maine, it's not exactly the best. We do get a lot of snow. We have the saying, and I'm sure it's like this around the country, you wait 5 minutes and the weather's going to change on you. And it does. Yesterday, I was outside doing some work and, all of a sudden, the temperature would vary like 10 degrees in the matter of a few minutes because the sun was, going in behind clouds and stuff, or then there'd be a sprinkle coming through and it's like, it was just, it's crazy, but that's the weather in Maine. So yeah, we're, all of the maintenance stuff, for, getting prepped for an opening is pretty much done. So now, like I said, it's the aesthetics that we can really focus on.
That's
Cool.
great. That's great. So the other hat that you wear that we also want to get into is secretary for NEAAPA, and position you've been in for a while. You've been very involved with NEAAPA for a long time, and you've been staying very closely in touch with all the different states, all the different operators around the New England region. So can you kind of give us a sense of kind of what's going on in that part of the country?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, NEAAPA is the New England Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions. And we are a regional attractions association that's made up of the 6 New England states: Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Vermont. We have members in all 6 of those states, plus manufacturers and suppliers from around the world. We've been, of course, very in tune with what's been going on with this and in each individual state, and working with our members in those states. So Connecticut is our bright spot right now. Connecticut, a couple weeks ago, came out with the recommendation and allowing amusement parks to open up starting on June 20th. We're still working out the details on that. They are looking, like it should be out either Friday or Monday from the state. So we're very excited about that. Rhode Island has allowed some outdoor attractions to open. We've got a zoo member there that opened up on Monday. And that was some really great news to hear. New Hampshire and Maine, we're still working with our states on what the opening is going to be like. Again, because we're so tourist driven, and in Maine, and being that there's a hot spot in Massachusetts, we've got hot spots in New York and New Jersey. They're taking a much more cautious approach as far as the reopening is going. So we haven't really gotten a whole lot of guidance yet, but we're hoping to get some within the next week or so. Vermont doesn't have any fixed site attractions, but they are canceling fairs and festivals this year. And Massachusetts, we're still working on that. They came out on Monday with that we are a phase 4 opening in Massachusetts, which is the establishment of the new normal being the new normal and or a vaccine. So we're working. I had just been on a conference call actually before we jumped on this to, strategize with our partners in Massachusetts, our members and other affiliates. What can we do? What is our next steps that we can take as attractions members to make sure that we can get going in there?
One thing that's been really interesting throughout all of this, particularly with the phased reopening plans and looking at it from that standpoint, is that there's been this kind of balance or this dance back and forth between leading and following, of wanting to put forth the processes and the procedures of what the new normal looks like, while also at the same time kind of this wait and see and looking at the guidance from the states. So curious, from NEAAPA's standpoint, what have you guys been doing to both follow the guidelines that the states are putting in place, but also being proactive to say, regardless of what the state says, these are the recommendations that our operators take?
So what we're doing is, in most of our states, there were no guidelines before we really were getting involved. We started working as an association in the middle of March, meeting weekly with our members, trying to get more information on what's happening on the ground. What are they hearing from their elected officials, state officials, and any information that they had. And we started putting that out in newsletters. At first they were going out daily because the information was changing so quickly, and we've been able to scale that back now to twice a week, trying to say and show that in a lot of ways we are the experts in our field. We know how parks run, we know how our guests behave, and we know what we can do in order to operate safely. As both of you know, safety is the hallmark of our industry. So this just falls into that same category of, this is a business driven on safety. So we are going to do everything in our power to make sure that we are offering a safe experience, as well as being fun and entertaining. So we were getting out in front of these guidelines in a lot of the times that we were working on this. So providing our NEAAPA guidance as well as the guidance that IAAPA came out with shortly before ours did, and showing that we've already been looking at this since day one. What changes are we going to have to make to our operations during this time of COVID-19? And knowing that we're going to be proactive in that. And that went over very well in a lot of the states that we work with, because, they're trying to understand how our operation works, and they only see it from the guest perspective. They don't necessarily know from the business side what goes into that. You know, being someone who's been in this industry, working at a park for so long, I still have people who are like, well, don't you just go in one day and everything runs? And it's like, absolutely not. They're always shocked that our park carries a staff of 25 year round. And, they're like, well, what do you do during the winter? And it's like, you wouldn't believe the amount of work we have during it. So knowing that they understand that, and we've even gone so far as to, in the different states, who the who inspects the parks, does those state mandated safety inspections before opening, even engaging them to make sure, they even know that we know what is going on. They're also, very knowledgeable in how our industry runs, and just also being an advocate for us on that side as well.
Yeah, a lot of obviously, really important communication going back and forth with a lot of different entities. And, Ed, one of the things I'm really curious about is you mentioned how big tourism is in New England, especially as you get into the northern part of New England, you get a lot of natural attractions, right? So it's not an amusement park with a roller coaster. It's, the flume, up in New Hampshire, or, the Kangamangas Highway, and, things like that. So those kind of fall under attractions as well. So, what are the things that NEAAPA is doing to kind of balance all those different types of attractions and type of tourism entities, to kind of create those guidelines and be the leader that Josh was talking about?
Yeah, it's tough because you do have such a broad range of members, where yes, the Flume Gorge is one of our members, and how do you address what they need as opposed to what like a Canopy Lake Park would need, or Funtown, or Six Flags, or Water Whiz down on the Cape Cod. It is a balancing act, but it's knowing that the guidelines that we're producing and putting out there are the guidelines that that are pretty ubiquitous for any attraction, as far as queuing, the physical distancing. One of the, I know you had Eric Beard on here as one of your guests earlier, and he came out in our meetings with talking about, physical density, the density of guests, and making sure that that's part of the conversation as opposed to capacity. And I think that's something that is universal around all of our attractions, is that yes, capacity as we know it could be different from the Flume Gorge as opposed to Canopy Lake, as opposed to Six Flags, but density is something that we can all work with, and trying to think of it in those terms that are both easy for the attraction to work with, as well as the state, committees that, they don't know much about our industry, if anything, to understand where we're at and what we're doing.
Yeah. One other thing I was curious about was, you talk about like, Massachusetts and Boston specifically, they're, the kind of the hot spot there. And so Massachusetts is probably going to roll out these guidelines. Well, Six Flags is almost on the other side of the state, right? So how does that play in when, there's a hot spot in part of the state, but there's this major attraction in a very different part of the state that may have to abide by those guidelines, and that, for that state overall? Yeah,
that has been a tough nut to crack. It is different, especially, in Maine. I'll give you guys a quick example. We're moving through our phases. One of, I believe we're in phase 2 right now. One of the guidelines or the benchmarks that we were looking at was the resumption of indoor dining with 6 foot distance between tables. Everyone was very excited about this. It's the returning back to the regular normalcy of what we're used to. And 5 days before June 1st, so that would have been the 26th, if my math serves me correctly, the governor of Maine came out and said, yes, indoor dining can resume, except for in York, Cumberland, and Androscoggin County. And those are the 3 most populated counties that they had supposed COVID outbreaks at that point. They were seeing, increases in and hospitalizations and things, and sort of pulling the rug out from underneath those industries with 5 days notice. Some of them had food and they're like, what do I do? Those are some of the challenges that we have where, you're going from one town to another and you have a totally different set of rules. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of the states now that we are seeming to I don't want to say get ahead of things, but the physical distancing seems to be working. Having these different approaches that we have taken as a state, as a nation, as people are working. So maybe ceding some of that control back to the local governments, whether it's county level or municipality level, saying, hey, if XYZ attraction has put in a plan, this is what their plan is. They took guidelines from NEAAPA or NEAAPA or, any one of these guidelines and said, okay, we're going to take this, use that to create our own plan, show that to, the local municipality, whether it's the health department, whether it's, emergency management, whomever they look at, and then say, we're comfortable with this, and then bring that to the state and say, okay, state, this is this park's plan, we're comfortable with it, are we good to go? And sort of just getting that tacit approval at that point, because the states, I feel, are probably looking at this like this is a much bigger task than what they had initially thought.
So are you guys looking at contingency planning from that standpoint? You mentioned, the restaurants that have just ordered all their inventory, highly perishable foods. You can't just put that back in the warehouse and sit around and wait to open. So, yeah. And that's just one contingency out of many that many operators might be facing if those plans change. So has that been something that NEAAPA has been looking at as far as, supporting operators and developing those?
As much as we can. I mean, I think that it is one of those things where this is still and always will be a moving target. So being able to, yes, we got approval in Connecticut, but if something, if there's a spike in Connecticut, anytime between now and the 20th, those plans could be shelved. It is a possibility, and just sort of having trying to be sort of present in that moment, like this can change on a dime. I wake up every morning now and I'm like, I'm here, I'm good. I'm just going to take what comes at me and work at it from there, and not try and think too much about the what ifs, because if I do that, then I'm going to paralyze myself.
Right.
So trying to just, impart that onto my members and say, look, it could change on a dime. We could, right now, Massachusetts, like I said earlier, is at phase 4. If we're successful in getting that moved up to phase 3, those attractions could open up that much faster. Or the phase 3s get, knocked back to phase 4. It's all going to be a moving target. And you also have to think of the possibility that if there is a spike, that they start shutting people down again. It's a possibility, and how you approach that. But I think it's something we have to be mindful of, and it's something you really can't prepare for. I mean, you can I can make all the plans. I had so many plans for this season here at Funtown, and they're all just, sitting on my desk waiting for 2021.
Right.
Yeah.
And with 6 different states under NEAAPA, with 6 somewhat different opening plans, you're going to have some states and even some regions and some specific attractions that are opening prior to the other states or to other NEAAPA members. We had a guest recently on this series that referred to those attractions as the Pathfinders, those that everyone is kind of looking towards as far as kind of for that guidance and that information of, hey, we've put all these contingency plans in place and we've done all these Zoom meetings and we've thought about and put on paper of what these procedures look like. Now we put them into place and see how staff and how guests, interact with those and how effective they are. How has NEAAPA been focusing on the attractions that have either opened or are about to open to make sure that information is able to be spread throughout the rest of the association?
Absolutely. So we, through our newsletters that we've been doing, when we hear, a park is opening up or an attraction is opening up, we will invite them to our Monday morning meetings, our Monday member meetings. and say, can you just give us an update on how did your weekend go? How was your opening go? What did you learn? What did you need to change from that? And then we take that, put it into our newsletter that goes out, on Wednesday, get that out to all the members. So we're trying to disseminate as much information as possible through the different means that we have, through electronic, through through Zoom meetings, through emails, through however we can get that information out to our members, just so that everyone is going to be able to learn from everyone else. We do compete in a way, but we're also, we're not adversarial in that respect. So we can all work together and learn from each other, so that we're all providing the best experience that we can for our guests.
Yeah, this has definitely been a time to come together much more than having any competitive sort of nature within the industry. As people have said from the beginning, we're all in this together, and the more information that's able to be shared, the better the industry will be and will recover from this. So,
right.
Ed, thanks so much for joining us here. Any final lasting thoughts or message to the industry?
I think we're as a regional association or even a state association, there aren't many of us out there. We have NEAAPA, there's New Jersey, the NJAA, Pennsylvania, PAPA, Pennsylvania Amusement Parks and Attractions, Florida, California, and some others out there. If your state has one of these, if you're in a state like that or a region like that, these associations are working overtime, trying to help get your industry back on its feet so that we can save 2020. So if you aren't a member, really consider joining to become a member, because they're doing so much work on your behalf to try and get this industry going again. And if your state doesn't have an association, maybe in these conversations start talking to the other players in this industry, and maybe there's an opportunity there that in the future you'll be able to rally together to advocate on your behalfs with whatever needs to happen, whether it's learning and or advocacy at the state level, what have you. There's always an opportunity there to learn and to work together.
Yeah, Ed, as someone who's a member of NEAAPA and a member of the Florida Attractions Association, I can attest to both of those associations literally working overtime, whether it's about communicating new standards, communicating what's happening. I think you both sent out something this morning about the payroll protection thing. As soon as that came out, everybody was on that and sending it out to their members. So I wholeheartedly agree. Like Josh said, we're all in this together. And if you are looking for those resources, I think starting with your local association is a great place to start. And then, feathering out until you get to the NEAAPA and the CDC and all that kind of stuff. But it's kind of the boots on the ground local organizations that are going to be able to help you, I think, the most, because they understand your region.
Absolutely. And we're all working together. In fact, when we started our meetings in New England, Pennsylvania jumped on a few weeks later, and we're like, what are you doing that we can do? And so I've been sitting in on the Pennsylvania meetings, and they sit in on our meetings. So we understand what's going on, not just in our region, but in other states that are in the Northeast, and how we can all work together. And by, just sharing information, Pennsylvania was having meetings with their tourism boards and on the state level, and taking that information. Okay, now what can we use that in another state that we may need to use that in? So we're even crossing borders here to try and help each other get open.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, that's great to hear. Well, Ed, thank you again so much for joining us here today, and we look forward to being able to see you again in person. And we'll have to make a trip out to Funtown Splashtown in 2021 to see all the new updates and the new the painting and the new landscaping and everything else that you guys have to offer. But in the meantime,
it's going to be good. We're really going to make it look spectacular, nice, bright, shiny park, almost brand new.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Be well, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you, Ed.